Assalamu alaikum. And well, this is Asia, and here's Saudi Arabia. Now let's go, shall we? It is 95% desert and is the largest nation on the Arabian Peninsula. But who would have foreseen that so much to shake the world would issue forth from this scorched and sand-lathered land? The Arabs are traditionally believed to be descendants of Abraham and his son Ishmael, whose progeny came to dwell in several pockets of the Middle East, including what would one day be known as Arabia. Here they lived as Bedouins, nomadic pastoralists, who, over time, split into different tribes and earned money through trade and caravan transportation. Some of these tribes formed prominent confederations or kingdoms, such as the Thamud, which arose in the 8th century BC. And from the most ancient attestations, the Arabs were known as a fighting people. Here we see Arab warriors mounted on camels depicted in Assyrian art. However, compared with the rest of the Middle East, Arabia slipped through the centuries with very little commotion, as mighty empires grew and toppled around it. Then, in the year 610, a man called Muhammad changed the world. Born in the western Arabian commercial town of Makkah, the story goes that whilst praying in a cave on this mountain, he was visited by an angel who imparted divine revelations, which would ultimately become the Quran. Thus, the religion of Islam, meaning submission, entered the stage of history. Muhammad gained followers, but also resistance from the pagans of Mecca. Muhammad's response to this pushback was to become a military commander, and he amassed an army and conquered Mecca. The Muslims smashed the idols there, for Islam believes there is only one God, Allah. After further battles, Muhammad conquered Arabia and established Islam as its dominant religion before dying in the year 632. Over the next 120 years, Muslim armies conquered more and more land, furthering the reach of Islam, which is today the second largest of all the religions on earth, followed by about a quarter of the world's population. Now, while Arabia remained revered in the hearts of Muslims as the birthplace of the Prophet and the site of Mecca, the city which Muslims make pilgrimages to and towards which they pray, the main centers of Islamic civilization were located outside of Arabia, in places like Baghdad and Damascus. Consequently, Arabia returned, for the most part, back to its tribalism of old. But there were bursts of action, some of them horrifying. For instance, in the year 930, Mecca was attacked and pillaged by a Persian warlord, whose forces slaughtered pilgrims and stole the sacred black stone, which they broke into several pieces. Some Arabian states gained considerable size and power, but Ottoman Turkish rule in Arabia began in 1517, after the Turks beat the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. But the Ottoman foothold was challenged in 1727 by a certain emir of the royal house of Saud. The state he founded lasted till 1818, when the Turks dismantled it in this war. The Saud monarch, who believed music to be sinful, was forced to listen to music before being beheaded in Constantinople. I don't think the Turks liked him. In fact, relations between Turkey and Arabia have not been great ever since. Anyway, the Saud family were determined to regain dominance in Arabia. Their chance arrived in the early 20th century. The Ottoman Empire was by this time much weaker than it once was, but still a potent threat to the Arabians, whose land was still very backward and poor. Ibn Saud began conquering with the aim of uniting the rival Arabian tribes under the Saudis. During World War I, the Arab world gained the British and French as allies in their revolt against the Ottoman Empire, which succeeded in ending Turkish rule. Saud continued his conquest of Arabia, crushed rebellion, and at last formed the country that would become known as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1932, an absolute monarchy informed by the ideology known as Wahhabism, a strict conservative version of Islam. The issue of the newborn nation's economic problems was soon resolved when the American Standard Oil Company of California discovered oil there. Lots of oil. This meant money. Lots of money. Ibn Saud died in 1953 and was succeeded by Saud. His reign saw the country finally abolish slavery in 1962, but Saudi Arabia also tumbled into enormous debt, and the king ended up deposed by his brother, Faisal. He tried to balance being pro-America and anti-Israel, and initiated an oil embargo on the Western countries that supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War, thus causing the 1973 oil crisis. He ended up assassinated by his nephew in 1975. A few years later, a gang of militants took over the Grand Mosque of Mecca, protesting the Saudi family and its pro-Western stance. After a battle lasting over 2 weeks, the rebels surrendered and had their heads chopped off in public. The Saudis supported the US in the Gulf War against Iraq, but not in its 2003 invasion. Many citizens of Saudi Arabia still did not like the country's close relationship with the United States, and most of the September 11 terrorists were Saudis. As the years galloped by, the country made several reforms and concessions to modernization. In 2015, Saudi Arabia intervened militarily in Yemen's civil war. The same year it allowed women to vote. In 2017 to 18, women were allowed to drive. While the country is criticized for its human rights record, Saudi Arabia possesses the Middle East's largest economy and a very high level of human development, and also, most importantly, hosts annual beauty contests for camels. Anyway, the question remains, what awaits Saudi Arabia in the years to come? Comment below, but for now, bye-bye!